I want to take the first 30 seconds of this video to acknowledge the irony and, pardon my French, the complete shittiness that is trying to navigate the mental health care system in the US. The irony is that oftentimes when we are seeking mental health treatment, we're sort of at our lowest point, and yet we have to fuck around with prior authorizations and phone calls, scheduling, insurance, billing, paying, phone calls. I do not like phone calls. And did I mention that you're probably at like your lowest point, maybe, perhaps? Hello and welcome to the UC Normal YouTube channel. My name is Molly and I talk about topics related to mental health and illness. This video is a part 2 of a video series that I'm doing about therapist shopping and finding care. If you missed the first video in the series, I'll link it in the card and I'll also put it in the video's description so you can check that out. That is all about researching and trying to find someone or a few therapists. So to summarize the previous video, I've narrowed down my therapy options to a list of a handful, and then I called the clinic where these few therapists work and I asked which are available and if I could get an appointment with one of them. I successfully was able to do that. And my first appointment, which they also call an intake appointment, is this week. So I thought I would continue the series today. So in this video, I will be telling you how I prep for an intake appointment and also what questions that I plan to ask this professional during the intake appointment about themselves and their professional life and integrity. So let's start with some intake appointment prep. And so the first thing that would likely take place is a lot of paperwork. So it would be insurance things like submitting your insurance card. It would be talking about who's responsible for billing and potentially getting a payment on file for them. It would be signing consent forms. That could be related to video visits as well. You probably need to sign a consent form. I want to say that I, again, for my previous video, do have a leg up and then I can skip this part because I'm staying with the same practice that my due therapist who's leaving was at. And so they already have this consent from me and they already have my insurance information, billing information, and things like that. And I will say that is a big plus because going through that like admin type of step is a complete barrier to care. And it's frustrating and it's annoying. And like I shared, you're likely at a you're not feeling the greatest, and yet you're sort of put through these things and hoops to jump through, like for the sake of it. Okay, so at an intake appointment, a therapist is required to ask a bunch of questions about your lifestyle. Some of these things may be like where you live, who you live with, who is your closest support system, what do you do for work, do you work? I don't really have to prep for those, I just sort of know that stuff. But what I do go ahead and prepare for is the history of my mental health and illness, because they will for sure ask that. It's honestly hard to gauge how much detail you should be going into in the intake appointment. And the reason I say that is because you want them to get an overview of your experience so they can better decide if you guys are a good fit together. But also, you don't want to self-disclose so much, especially if you haven't gotten the idea of what this person is like and they might not even end up being your therapist. So then the level of self-disclosure that you might have engaged in leaves you kind of feeling drained and like embarrassed. I don't know if that's the right word, but. And so what I try to do is stick to the top level so that they can get the gist of my history and current experiences. And then as needed throughout, if this ends up being my therapist, they can ask for details and I can share those as I'm willing and able to share those details. Okay, so this is the list of stuff that I prepared. So number 1, I prepare, and I'm looking at my notes here, my list of diagnoses. There is a good reason that there is like skepticism and criticism on the purpose of diagnoses and diagnosis, as well as the history of the DSM, as well as categorizing people based on symptoms, as well as pathologizing things that are actually normal to the human experience. but that's not this video. The reason I say you can list your diagnoses is it can help get you on the same page it can help get them on your page, rather. And diagnosis can be helpful in giving a top level of perhaps what your experience is like and what symptoms you may face. So I do go ahead and list that. And then the second thing I do is list my top struggles over the years, and I specifically pay attention to my top struggles over the past 1 to 2 years-ish, and like in my current life, because that's likely the reason I'm seeking therapy. That might not be the case for you, but that's what I zoom in on for what I need. And then, so basically wrap that into what I'm coming to get care and help with. Then I'll share a brief history on my mental health care in the past. And so I'll include childhood, teenage, and so on. You might want to share the experiences you've had with therapy in the past. So for example, had you been in therapy as a child at all? Is this your first time with therapy? It's also important to share any hospitalizations as you are willing to share. And then also psychiatric medications, and that's helpful for them to know for your treatment. I'm not a therapist, but I am guessing that they like to know that. Another thing is they do know things about medication, even though many therapists are not prescribers. That's more on the psychiatry side. But they can see things, when patterns pop up, they might be able to identify if something if you should go and ask questions about the medication you're on or the medication you're not on. They could help with that. So I think it is helpful for them to know that, and also how long that you've been taking these psychiatric medications. So a bit of history there. And the thing is, you likely know all of this information, right? That was everything. That was diagnosis, your top struggles, a brief history. You likely know all of that, but I find that when I'm just sitting in the meeting, like trying to recall the top things, I'm like, oh yeah, and I forgot this. Like it's a waste of time for me. So I'd rather just write a few bullet points, notes ahead of time, so I already have that in my head, like right in the front, ready to recall. Okay, so we're gonna get into the questions that you might decide to ask the therapist when you're in that first intake session. And it is important to remember that you're sort of interviewing each other in a way, because you're trying to figure out if this would be a positive, effective, therapeutic relationship, and if you're able to, if they're able to help you achieve some of the goals that you have, so that you're better able to live your life. And so your most effective therapist is going to be the therapist that gets you closer to these goals. So it helps, they will help you make progress on these goals. This relationship is supposed to be compatible and supportive. This relationship, you're not looking for your new best friend. You're not looking for your new best friend, because sometimes I'm looking for this like sort of this sort of connection, but it's like this is still a professional relationship, and they're an expert in things, and they are here and they're being paid to support you. So you're not looking for your new best friend, but you are looking for someone who is compatible and like in sort of conversation and communication style, and just the things that they're going to be looking to offer you. If they're going to be super, quote unquote, homework heavy, and that's not, and you find that that's not going to be helpful to you, or that could be like a barrier to you, then, that could be a consideration. And finally, an effective therapist has good intentions, and they care about you in a normal client way. They care about you. So the caveat here is you can't be too choosy when you're at the point where it is hard to find this type of care in general across the country. Because as soon as you start to get too picky and choosy, you're gonna run out of options, and you're gonna keep delaying your care because you keep having intake appointments, basically, if there's even anyone else available to keep taking those with you. So it's really finding the balance between the two, between finding the right fit, but also not being so incredibly picky that you're not going to have any options left, and so you're just not going to be able to get this care, or it's going to be so delayed. I have reasons behind all of these questions. I encourage you, if you have questions for your potential provider that you would also incorporate them into this. So here are mine. So the first one I have is, how do you further your education? And just very quickly, I will say that I had an intake appointment with a woman, a certified something or other, employed by a reputable medical institution, that when I said that I experienced struggles of having obsessive compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, she said, I've never heard of that. And so that's just not gonna work for me personally. And I have a blog post on that if you would like to read it, and I will put that in the description and in the card as well. And I kind of talk a bit why that was a red flag for me. The second thing I ask is, do you have experiences with patients who, and then fill in what your top struggles are. If they've never ever had a patient with these struggles, this might not be your person. If they commonly see this type of patient, that is a green flag for me. Third thing I ask is, what do they assign or suggest for out of session work? Are they a fan of recommending books? I'm a big books person, and so if they have that for me, I'm probably gonna like that. Do they do workbooks? Do they do exercises and have you report back on them? Is there anything like that happening? Because sometimes that kind of thing can turn you off, and other times it's like, I need that kind of thing. I need this to be on the top of my mind every single day. What can you do to give that to me, even when we're in the interim of when we're not having an appointment? And the fourth thing that's on my list is saying what you're looking for. So I'm looking for a therapist who fill in the blank. This could be, so for me, continues their education, keeps up with things that are sort of happening that could impact one's mental health in a day-to-day life. Someone who is going to be challenging, is going to challenge me, but also be very supportive. Someone who is available to, if I call them or if I call the clinic, they will be able to get back to me within a day or so. I've had some where I've left voicemails, basically been in crisis, and I never heard back. And then I would say, do you think we're the right fit? And I think some practices, clinics, providers make it very clear that that's what they're looking for, is they do want to make sure it's the right fit. Other times it's more about filling the slots for them, and I know that it's a challenging profession and a impossible model that's set up. I do get that. But it's a green flag if they do say something like, I do want to make sure we're the right fit. I do think we are. I do think that maybe we're not. Here's this other person in the practice who I know is accepting patients and works more with these kinds of things. Green flag. So again, my appointment is this week, just a few days away. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to do my little notes for my intake. Wish me luck on that. I will be back for a third video in the series. And in that one, I'll cover how my appointment went. And then I'll also cover a first impressions questionnaire that was created by yours truly. This is a questionnaire that I do at the end of the session, and I do it the first 2 to 3 times to just sort of objectively gauge how it's going, because it can be hard to remember if, in a couple days, it can be hard to remember, what did I have for dinner? How did that therapy session go? Anyone else? And also that exclusive You Seem Normal questionnaire will be available to you for free, of course. So make sure that you are subscribed to this channel. Also, the last thing that I'll talk about in that video is, what are the next steps if if you think this is the right person, or if this is not, if you're just you're in the middle, or if you're this is red flag. What are the next steps then? Then what? I will see you then. I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye.